Hey, what's up guys, it's me your boy Urban Kaste Kevinish back here with another brand new video and I hope you guys are having a great day. So I'm here back to give my driver rating for the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. So without any further ado, let's get right into the video guys. So starting off with our pole sitter and our race winner, Max Verstappen. Well, I'm gonna give him a 10 out of 10. Well, a flawless performance from Max Verstappen. He had a Grand Slam in this Grand Prix, so it has to be a flawless performance. He made no mistake all through the weekend, from free practice to qualifying, leading up to the race itself. He made zero mistakes, so I'm gonna give him a 10 out of 10. So now moving on to his teammate Sergio Perez. Well, I'm gonna give him a 7 out of 10. The race was a good recovery stint for him to finish P4 starting P11, but honestly he had to start from P11 because he bottled in the qualifying session in a car that was very much capable of putting him in the front row of the grid. So it's honestly down to his own mistake. So for that reason I'm gonna give him 7 out of 10. So moving on to Lewis Hamilton. Well, a flawless drive from him. We saw no mistake from his part, apart from the little touch and go with his teammate in the qualifying session. Other than that, Lewis had a very flawless weekend and a brilliant performance for him to finish P2 in the race, and his qualifying pace was also on par. So I'm gonna give Lewis Hamilton a 9 out of 10. So moving on to his teammate George Russell. Well, I'm gonna give him a 7 out of 10. So the reason I give Russell 7 out of 10 is because he got knocked out in Q2 and he started P12 in the race, but he finished P3 on the podium step. So he had a brilliant first lap, gaining a handful of places, and it was very crucial now looking back at his race. But honestly, the little touch and go that he had in the qualifying session with his teammate, he should have probably been looking at his rearview mirror, because Lewis was right alongside him. I do kind of have to put a little bit of blame on George Russell for that incident, but other than that, it was a flawless drive in the race itself. He managed to finish right behind his teammate, though it was a 10-second gap. That 10-second gap was basically down to him having to start from P11. He had to make the position as the race went along. Honestly, a good performance from George Russell. So I'm gonna give him a 7 out of 10. So moving on to the Ferrari driver, Carlos Sainz Jr., the home favorite. Well, I'm gonna give him a 8 out of 10. I think he made the best out of the car that he was given to drive. The upgrades seem to have worked well on his car at least. I don't know if the imbalance in Charles' car was down to the new upgrades, or I don't know what was the issue with the car. So I think Carlos did a great job. I'm going to give him a 8 out of 10. He managed to put the car on the front row of the grid in his home race. I know on a home race it can be a plus and a minus, because you have that additional boost of energy from your home crowd, which will help you get and extract that extra tenth out of the car. But also it can put some pressure on you, so it's important for you to deliver under that pressure, and Carlos, I think, genuinely did just that. He managed to put the car on the front row in the qualifying, and even in the race he managed to finish in the top 5. I think that was the best that Carlos could do with that car. So I think he maximized on his result. So I'm gonna give him a 8 out of 10. So moving on to his teammate Charles Leclerc. Well, here's where my excitement drops, because I actually started watching this season, the 2023 season, rooting for Charles Leclerc to win and fight for the championship, but it's going the other way around. He is really struggling this season. I don't know if it is the car or if he is lacking the motivation, whether it is down to the lack of confidence, I don't know, because honestly his performance in this first half of the 2023 season has been probably the worst performance he's had in his career in Formula 1. Qualifying, he got knocked out in Q1. I think it is down to the car. He was facing major imbalance with the car through the left-handers, if I'm not wrong. It was definitely not a weekend for Charles Leclerc to remember. Even in the race, he did not feel comfortable with the car. The pace of the car was so inconsistent in each of the stint, and he finished the race P11 just in the fringes of points. So I'm gonna give Charles Leclerc a 4 out of 10. So moving on to Lance Stroll. Well, it is probably one of his best weekends because he genuinely beat his teammate in a Grand Prix. He managed to outqualify Fernando, and he also managed to outrace Fernando by finishing P6, which is also the place where he qualified for the race. So honestly, a flawless drive from Lance Stroll. He made no mistakes. So I'm going to give him a 8 out of 10. So moving on to his teammate Fernando Alonso. Well, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Well, there is a reason why I'm going to give Fernando 7 out of 10. It's because he put the car on the gravel in the qualifying session, which damaged his underflow, which also ruined his qualifying performance. I think Fernando easily had a top 5 or a top 4 slot in him in the qualifying session. But honestly, it was all down to the fact that he had a broken underfloor, which definitely hampered his performance in the qualifying session. And even in the race, he managed to make some inroads starting from P9. He finished the race P7, which I think is still a good place to finish. He finished just behind his teammate, and I think he also finished just with a second in spare to his teammate. So honestly, it is a flawless drive from Fernando. I think that is all the pace that the Aston Martin had this weekend, and I hope that the upgrades that Aston Martin is going to bring to their car to the Canadian Grand Prix would really put them back to being the podium contenders that they were at the start of this season. So moving on to Esteban Ocon. Well, I'm going to give Esteban Ocon a 8 out of 10. Well, I think it was a flawless drive from him. He made no mistakes. He qualified P7 and he finished the race P8. So he just dropped back behind Fernando Alonso, but other than that, it was a flawless drive from him. He made no mistakes. Well, other than the little mischievous move that he made on Fernando Alonso by defending him by riding him closer to the pit wall, I think other than that, Esteban Ocon had a pretty quiet race, and for that I'm going to give him 8 out of 10, which is considered as a good race performance. So moving on to his teammate Pierre Gasly. Well, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. I'm going to give him 7 out of 10 because of the penalty that he had to take for impeding 2 cars in the qualifying session, and also for losing too many positions at the race start, because I think that really put him in a very tough spot because he had to make too many positions on top of the place where he started from. So he qualified actually in a really good place. He actually outqualified his teammate. He qualified P4, whereas Esteban Ocon qualified P7. But because of the grid penalty that he had to take, the 6th place grid penalty he had to take for impeding another car on a quali lap, he was dropped down to P10. So starting from P10, at the first lap he lost a little too many places, which resulted in him having to get back to P10 to finish the race, which is also the place where he started the race from in the first place. So for that reason, I'm going to give Pierre Gasly a 7 out of 10. So moving on to Zhou Guanyu. Well, it is probably one of his best weekends this year. He had a good qualifying session compared to his teammate. He qualified P13 and he managed to finish the car in the points. He finished the race P9, which is a good points paying position. He was always in the fight for the points, so it's not like he got into the points because of Yuki Tsunoda's penalty. I think Yuki got the penalty because he was fighting Zhou Guanyu. So I think he was there in the points on merit, and kudos to him because this is probably one of his best performances this year so far, and I can see a very gradual but a very significant improvement in Zhou Guanyu's overall race pace. So kudos to him, and for that I'm gonna give Zhou Guanyu 8 out of 10. For his teammate Valtteri Bottas though, well, it is probably another weekend that I hope he would rather want to forget. He qualified P16 for the race and finished the race P19. He was pretty much nowhere in the race, and for that single reason I'm gonna give Valtteri Bottas a 3 out of 10. So moving on to Yuki Tsunoda, I'm gonna give him a 5 out of 10. He got outqualified by his teammate. He qualified P15 and he finished the race P12. because he got that 5-second penalty for pushing Zhou Guanyu off the track. So for that reason, I'm gonna give Yuki Tsunoda a 5 out of 10. But other than that, except for his qualifying performance and for pushing Zhou Guanyu off track, other than that, I think he had a brilliant weekend. He managed to make great inroads starting from P15 to get into points, or at least fight for points as usual. So for that, I'm gonna give him 5 out of 10, which is considered as a decent race performance. So moving on to his teammate Nick De Vries. Well, I think as we are starting to get more towards the traditional race tracks, I think Nick De Vries is feeling more and more comfortable with the car and with the tracks that we're going to, because his one lap pace is at least improving definitely compared to where it was. He managed to outqualify his teammate by 4/10. He qualified P14 ahead of his teammate, and he managed to finish the race P14 as well. I think it was a very balanced weekend from Nick De Vries. He did have a bit of moment in the qualifying session, especially at sector 3, at the start of sector 3, at the damp part of the track. He had a handful of spins before he managed to get a good lap in, which helped him to outqualify his teammate. But other than that, I think Nick De Vries had a decent and a balanced weekend. So for that, I'm going to give Nick De Vries a 6 out of 10. So moving on to Lando Norris. Well, I'm going to give Lando Norris 5 out of 10. Wait a second, I know that this may sound a bit harsh, but the thing is that he managed to qualify P3. I know that the one lap pace doesn't mean anything, because the long run race pace is where you score the points at, and McLaren is pretty much nowhere near the Red Bull or the Mercedes right now. And I know the eventuality is for the McLaren and Lando Norris to fall back, but I did not expect for him to fall back as soon as he did. He had to have been a bit more cautious considering the kind of situation he's in, considering the car he has underneath him. He ran into the back of Lewis Hamilton, had a front wing damage. He had to pit right away, which put him right at the back of the grid, and he finished the race P17. So I think just for the qualifying performance, I'm going to give Lando Norris a 5 out of 10. So moving on to his teammate Oscar Piastri, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Oscar, I think, had, again, just like Nick De Vries, a very balanced and a decent weekend. He managed to get into the Q3, he managed to qualify P10, and even though he did fall back under the race trim, like we had expected, he managed to still finish P13. So I think, nonetheless, he managed to outrace his teammate. We know that the eventuality is for the McLaren to fall back on Sunday. So it is expected for Oscar Piastri to get out of the points. So knowing the eventuality, considering he still finished P13, I think 7 out of 10 is the perfect score for Oscar Piastri for this weekend. So moving on to Kevin Magnussen. Well, I'm gonna give him a 4 out of 10. Kevin Magnussen qualified P17, and he was humongously outqualified by his own teammate Nico Hülkenberg, who got into Q3 and actually qualified P8. Even though he did fall back in the race, still, even under one lap pace, the pace difference between Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg is humongous. And considering Nico is in his first year in the Haas and Kevin Magnussen is in his second year, I think Kevin should have the upper hand over Nico. Well, it is the other way around. So for that, and because still Kevin Magnussen finished the race P18 behind his teammate, I'm gonna give Kevin Magnussen a 4 out of 10. For his teammate Nico Hülkenberg though, brilliant qualifying session. He qualified P8, but he finished the race P15. And the P15, though, is not a bad place to finish for a Haas. I expected a lot from Haas this weekend. I expected for them to really perform well, but I was proven quickly wrong, because their race trim is, I think, the biggest limitation factor for the Haas race car this year. Their one lap pace is brilliant, but under a long run race trim, the Haas car just is not as quick or as competitive as the other cars on the grid. So for Nico Hülkenberg, I'm going to give 6 out of 10 just for that massive effort in the qualifying session. So moving on to Alex Albon. Well, I'm going to give Alex Albon a 7 out of 10. I think he did the maximum he could with the car that he had underneath him. He qualified P18 for the race and actually moved ahead in the race. He managed to finish the race P16, which I think is still a very commendable position and a huge progress that he made on the race. So he finished ahead of a McLaren, a Haas, a Alfa Romeo and a Williams of his own teammate. So considering he out-qualified and outraced his own teammate and actually made some inroads in the race from the place he started the race from, I'm gonna give Alex Albon a 7 out of 10. Moving on to his teammate Logan Sargent though. Well, a rough weekend for him, let's say that. He had a crash in FP3 if I'm not wrong, and in qualifying he was nowhere there. I think Catalonia as a track layout is very simple and pretty straightforward, and I think for any rookie the Catalonia track has to be one of the easy tracks for them to score some good points on a car that is capable of doing so, or even in a car that is not good enough to score points. I think for a rookie, Catalonia is the kind of track where you can make some impressionable performances, and I think Logan Sargent just missed out on all of that. He qualified P20 and he finished the race P20 as well. So not so impressionable weekend from Logan Sargent. So I'm gonna give Logan Sargent a 2 out of 10 for this race weekend. So yes guys, that would be my driver rating for the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. Let me know in the comment section on what is your rating for all the drivers for the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. I'm excited to know. And with that being said, I would like to wrap up this video guys. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe to the Autobahn Cast YouTube channel if you haven't already. Also hit the bell icon and turn on all notifications so you get notified whenever I upload a brand new video. It's me, your boy Autobahn Cast, aka Vinesh, and I'm out. Love you guys, stay safe, peace.